Now I'm going to throw it to John, and he's going to take the wheel for the fantasy week 9 starts/sits. And I do have a question. I can either lead with that or end with that, whatever you want.
Uh, let's go ahead and get into the starts real quick, and then we can end off with that. So, starts and sits. Say this every week. Always going to say it. Not going to tell you to start the elite of the elite players. If you have Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, uh, I don't know, Devontae Adams. I don't care if Aaron Rodgers is playing. I don't care if Jameis Winston isn't there and Taysom Hill is going to vulture stuff. You play those kind of players because that's who they are. So if they're that level player, you're going to start them. Not going to talk about those. These are more streaming options, guys who are you're not maybe as confident about that. I want to bring some confidence for. So to start off at quarterback, the starts of the week, Taysom Hill is the first one. This one doesn't have has an asterisk to it because he is coming off an injury, and so monitor the injury status because maybe he does not play. Maybe Trevor Siemian gets the start. Maybe he does play, but he's not playing at quarterback, and they just put him in his normal role. But if he's playing at quarterback, I would start Taysom Hill. When he did play quarterback last year, I think there was a 4-week stretch in which he was the 6th ranked quarterback in fantasy. And a large part of that is because of his rushing value. He can run for touchdowns. He gets a lot of rushing yards. And I think that the Saints we've seen this year, they can run the ball effectively behind that offensive line with Alvin Kamara. And I think that with that duo of Kamara and Taysom Hill in the backfield, you just can't really commit to stopping the quarterback runs. Plus Taysom, if they do, start, throwing the ball, he always has the threat to break out and just scramble. So start Taysom Hill if you can. And the next quarterback is Tua Tagovailoa from the Miami Dolphins. Plain and simple, they're playing the Houston Texans, one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL so far. Tua has been relatively good over the last 4 weeks. He has had some ups, has had some downs, but the downs were against teams like the Buffalo Bills, who have an elite defense. Houston is not that by any means. They're a lot closer to Atlanta, who Tua threw 4 touchdowns against. So I would go with Tua if you can start him. If you're not confident in your quarterback, or maybe you have somebody on bye week like Tom Brady, start a guy like Tua. Next, at running back, we're going to go with Boston Scott from the Philadelphia Eagles. They do play the Chargers, and as we know about the Chargers, Brandon Staley will typically play 2 high safeties, which invites teams to run the ball. Maybe Brandon Staley adjusts because of the Jalen Hurts stuff and how he's not maybe fully confident that Hurts can beat them over the top. But I wouldn't entirely bet on it. I think that even if they do, Boston Scott has the red zone value as well. He can get goal line carries. We know that Jordan Howard was also a threat there, but he got 2 touchdowns last week. And I think that the Eagles are just going to be committed to running the ball against the Chargers, who ultimately have not been amazing against the run this year. And the next one is Josh Jacobs from the Raiders. Plain and simple, I think that there's just some distractions happening within the wide receiver room. Darren Waller is back and he's healthy, but still, coming off of an injury. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they run the ball here. I think the Giants are ranked 25th in the league in run defense. And so that just means, hey, let's rely on our bell cow, Josh Jacobs. Let's get him some touchdowns. Let's get him some touches. I would start Josh Jacobs in this matchup to where there's just a lot going on when it comes to the receivers, the tight ends, the passing game as a whole. Keep it simple and run the ball. So I would start Josh Jacobs. At wide receiver, Devontae Parker from the Miami Dolphins. The big question for Devontae Parker this year has been his health, but when he does play, he's been incredibly reliable. I think he's had over 14 points per game when he does play. And as I said, with Tua, they're playing the Texans. The Texans are really bad, especially their corners. They just have not been amazing. And so Devontae Parker, I think if he's playing in this one, should absolutely have a good game. The next wide receiver, Jarvis Landry from the Cleveland Browns. The Bengals defense has been okay, but they're not very good at stopping stuff underneath, as we saw last week against the Jets. And Jarvis Landry typically works in the slot. He does get some work on the outside. Wherever he is, the Bengals corners, they've been okay, but not amazing. They're one of the more fantasy-friendly defenses for wide receivers to go against. And also the big news is that Odell Beckham has been excused from back-to-back practices. He's most likely not going to be playing in this one. So that means that Jarvis Landry is probably the go-to target in this passing offense. So I would expect Baker Mayfield to rely pretty heavily on him in this game. So start Jarvis Landry. And the final wide receiver, Cole Beasley from the Buffalo Bills. They play Jacksonville. Jacksonville, I think, has been one of the worst defenses when it comes to guarding slot wide receivers. Overall, Jacksonville's defense has just not been very good. But specifically, their slot corner has been struggling this year. I think he's the second worst corner in the league when it comes to, or slot corner in the league when it comes to fantasy receivers and the point totals. So start Cole Beasley because just matchup wise, it's an amazing matchup for him, and they should be putting up a lot of points. At tight end, Tyler Higbee from the LA Rams. They play Tennessee. Tennessee has been struggling with injuries. They don't have Derrick Henry, so they maybe can't really run the ball as well as they want to, which means time possession could be hurt on the Tennessee side. That means the Rams get the ball more. Tyler Higbee, he is there in the elite numbers when it comes to routes being run, snaps played, and all that kind of stuff. Even targets have been solid. The production hasn't fully been there because he hasn't been involved as much in the red zone, and he hasn't been getting a ton of yards. But I would say this could be the week to do it against the Titans team that, they might have to take a little more risks on defense to keep their team in the game without Derrick Henry. So start Tyler Higbee at tight end. Moving on to the sits of the week. We're going to start at quarterback, Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons. They play the Saints. The Saints are a very good defense. We saw that Matt Ryan couldn't get much going against the Carolina Panthers last week. I expect more of the same this week. No Calvin Ridley. Only so much that Kyle Pitts and Cordell Patterson can do in this one. Even Russell Gage, he's probably going to be guarded by Marshawn Lattimore. So, what does Matt Ryan really have in this one? Not a whole lot. I would sit Matt Ryan against the Saints defense. And then finally at quarterback, last sit, Jimmy Garoppolo from the 49ers. They play the Cardinals. The Cardinals defense is missing J.J. Watt, and I think the Niners defense is going to have some success against the Cardinals offense, but I just still wouldn't bet on it against the Cardinals. They still have a very athletic, fast defense that can just move around and do a lot against the pass game, and so this feels a lot more like an Elijah Mitchell sort of game. Niners rely heavily on the run, keep this one close. I don't think that Jimmy's going to have a bad game, but I just don't think that he's necessarily going to be throwing 30 times in this one. So I would sit Jimmy Garoppolo against the Cardinals. At running back, this one should be a little self-explanatory, but Adrian Peterson, he is 36 years old. He just got signed to the roster 2 or 3 days ago. And, we don't know how much of him we're really going to see. I would think Jeremy McNichols is the far more reliable option in their first game. Maybe AP can prove something otherwise, but I wouldn't be betting on it in his first game. Sit Adrian Peterson once again against the Rams' number 1 ranked run defense, according to Pro Football Focus. The next running back is Latavius Murray from the Ravens. First off, he's dealing with injury, so he might not even play in this one. But I just wouldn't really bet on him having an amazing game. Minnesota has some great defensive tackles. They've been solid against the run. And I think if they're going to be bouncing things to the outside, that's where Lamar Jackson, even Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell, Tyson Williams, any of those guys are probably more likely to be used outside the tackles. And so with the question marks of Latavius Murray's health, would not be starting him this week against Minnesota. Moving on to wide receiver, Marvin Jones from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Simply, they're playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the best pass defense in the league so far. And I think they're going to get a lot of pressure on Trevor Lawrence, force him into some mistakes. And that's just, you don't want to be investing in that sort of an offense this week in fantasy. So bench Marvin Jones. And for that part, just pretty much bench all of the Jaguars pass catchers, except for maybe Dan Arnold at tight end because safety blanket. Next wide receiver, Devonta Smith from the Eagles. As once again, we know about the Chargers. They're more likely going to allow things to happen underneath, more likely going to allow the Eagles to run the ball. And so I think Devonta Smith, he just could have a tough matchup against a Chargers secondary that's going to sit back, not really allow a whole lot through the air. And also he might be matching up with Asante Samuel Jr., who has been pretty solid this year on the outside. So I would avoid Devonta Smith from the Eagles. And the final wide receiver, Jacoby Myers from the Patriots. They played Carolina with Stephon Gilmore in last week. The Carolina defense was fantastic. They really shut down what the Falcons wanted to do. And although Jacoby Myers is getting the targets, his targets just have not really turned into production that we want to see. So I'd be avoiding Jacoby Myers because this just seems like a game where, once again, the Patriots, they keep things short underneath and they rely on the run game and Damian Harris. And the final sit of the week at tight end, Zach Ertz from the Arizona Cardinals facing up against the 49ers. And we saw the last time they played, they were able to have success against Kyler. So I think they're not going to be scoring as many points as they do. If they do, I think it's, you have Hopkins if he plays. If he doesn't, AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, so many other options. It's just hard to really bet on Zach Ertz being reliable in fantasy. And finally, he has to go against potentially Fred Warner, and that's just a tough matchup that you don't want to be seeing, in the passing game. So those are the starts and sits of the week. That is all I have. Don't know if you have any comments. If you don't, what is the question that you got?